Hi guys, welcome to a webinar. I am Ross Grieve and welcome to Capturing the Motion. So today we're going to go through lots of different things about how to do motion blur, to freeze images from street photography to sport to portraits. And we're also going to talk about 4K and 6K photography, which is really interesting. And it shows you how to get those really cool images that you're struggling to freeze. So if I just jump in here, tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Ross Grieve, I'm a Kiwi. I'm now living in good old the UK, been in Wales for about 25 years. I am a portrait and commercial photographer and I dabble in weddings as well. And I've been a professional photographer over 25 years. I love colour and I am a colour geek, hence I'm also an X-Rite Colorati as well. And a big fan of prints. And you'll see a couple of prints today as well. I'll hold them up so for an example as well. I'm a bit of a, I was told I was a bit of a pioneer of 4K and 6K photography. I took that on probably about 6-7 years ago when the technology was first out there. So I'll sort of explain in depth. It's not that complicated. It's really easy. All you need is a device or a camera that can shoot 4 and 6K. I shoot everything on Lumix cameras because that's what I started with on a GH4. So that's sort of what I'm using now. Hence this thing here is on a GH5. So capturing the motion. People think if you're capturing the motion, you've got to freeze it, you've got to get it crisp and sharp. But the way I kind of think and the way I treat my images is I want to actually show that motion into it or give the illusion that there's motion into it as well. If you take a look at the image here, this is at an Ironman, the guy's finishing, you can't ask someone to do that. That's just luck. But it's showing the motion of him jumping in the air, and I've frozen that, I've captured that motion because of his movement and the shape that he's taken. If I add shutter drag to that, and you'll see some terms that are going to be used a lot today, dragging the shutter basically means a slow shutter speed. But if I drag the shutter in this image, it wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have had that crucifix, which he's done there, and it just wouldn't work. And this went on to be published in a sports mag, so it was great. Freezing the subject, which I've done here, is another term you'll hear a lot as well. So I just want to get those like droplets of water or that atmosphere and freeze it, but sort of show that there's emotion to it by what's going on in the scene. And that's how I sort of shoot my stuff. Obviously, portraiture, you're freezing images, but sometimes you want to add a little bit more and add some motion into it. I try to get a lot of it right in camera as well because I don't like spending too much time on Lightroom and Photoshop. We'll dive into Lightroom later on as well, and you'll see sort of how quick I work in Lightroom, and that's just the way I work. Everyone works differently, and that's just the way I tend to work. We'll also look at dragging and panning. So you'll hear like drag the shutter and panning, so you sort of slow shutter, but you're moving with it. So I'll describe how that works as well. So there's lots of things you can get out and practice as well. But also, don't forget when you're looking at this stuff, think outside the box. You'll see lots of images today, and I'm going to share, and there'll be no secrets. So there'll be lots of information shared with you. You can just dive in, and hopefully you can go out and practice and get used to it as well. So what do we mean by freezing the motion? This was actually shot a couple of years ago now. It's crazy that we sort of didn't shoot much last year. But this is a classic one where I've just got some fabric and clipped it onto Alice's back. And then I've got two people either side, and they're just wafting the fabric up and down. So it's creating that illusion of motion. But I've frozen that motion, and I've freeze that, captured it, but you've got the visual representation that there's movement in there, and I've overlaid a couple of shots of the actual fabric moving. So it's not just one shot, there's several shots of the fabric moving, and it gives that really nice fluid look. Now, that's a sideways motion. If you've got something that is actually running towards you full pelt, how do you deal with that? So this is what you're looking at as a still. But this one here is a 4K photo. So this is Ebony, and it's been shown a few times, but I'll explain it if you haven't heard it. So Ebony is running full pelt at me, and I've pre-focused where you can see her feet are. So I've put a bag where her feet are, pre-focused, flicked it to manual, so I've locked the focus down. She is lit by 4 lights, 4 LEDs, because I'm shooting in video. And I'll go in depth into what 4K and 6K is in a bit as well. So you've got 4 lights here. So I've created this light pool or light tunnel. Put the camera on the floor, hit record, and got a treat above the camera, and she's run straight towards me. So it's really, really cool, especially when you're working with pets, but it increases your chance of getting the image because you're exploiting the frame rate. We'll talk about that a bit more as well. So dragging the shutter, what does dragging the shutter? Slow shutter speed, as I said before. So you'll hear that term, dragging the shutter. And as you can see here, this is a homeless guy in Osaka. And people are going back and forth, not taking any notice of him at all. But what's happening is it's creating a nice little sort of tunnel or view for me to isolate him by just dragging that shutter or having a slow shutter. Now, I shot this at 1/5 of a second handheld on a GX8. So that's got in-body stabilization. So if your camera's got dual stabilization, which is in the lens and in the body, that's going to help you a lot, and it's going to allow you to shoot at slower shutter speeds. Try to shoot with your camera against your chest. So rather than having it out here, bring it back here, and it gives you that little bit more stability as well. I will tend to lean against objects as well. So I've almost got 4 points if you can. If there's a barrier or something you can lean against, it just gives you that stability. But most of the time, you'll be fine. So this took a few shots to get. He's walking with people walking back and forth. I think it took about 5 shots to get. But just that patience and get your timing right. So the photograph is always out there to be taken. You've just got to see it. Once you see it, you'll nail it every time. So what do I mean about panning and dragging? Panning and dragging is you find the subject you want, so you're panning with that subject, but you're also dragging that shutter. So you've got a slow shutter and you're panning and dragging. So what this does, it isolates a person again. So everything behind is going to be blurred. And this is really, really good for, say, motorsports or triathlons or cycling races, because you can shoot it like about a 30th of a second at, say, f/22, and you can pan and really isolate the subject, but you get that illusion of speed. And this is what it's all about. It's adding that illusion of speed and motion into your shots. And it just brings everything together and gives you some really good creativity that you can create in camera, and you don't actually have to do it post. So 4K photography, 6K photography, what is it? Let me explain. 4K and 6K photography is, as it says, 4K is 4 times the resolution of HD, as we have HD tellies. So imagine you've got your 1 telly, HD telly, and suddenly 3 more appear, so you've got 4 HD tellies. That's the resolution. 6K, 6 times the resolution of HD. So to give you an example, an 8 megapixel file, you're going to shoot 30 or 60 frames per second. That's a lot more than the standard 10 frames a second with the still. I know you can shoot higher on some mirrorless cameras, and I think about 20 frames a second now you can shoot. But with the 6K file, you get an 18 megapixel file that you can work from, and 30 frames a second. Now, what some people think, they think an 8 megapixel file, I'm not going to get much from that at all. That's not very big. How can I possibly get a decent size print? I'll show you what size print you can get. This is a 4K photo, and this is a 24-inch print. And to give you an idea what it is, always do these. If you want to test your 4K photo, do it with a wine glass. It's much more fun. So that was one. And then I thought, I reckon I can make it even bigger. And this is my good old mate, Dave Wall. So this is a good thing about portraits with 4K and 6K photo. There's no shutter, because what happens when people have their photo taken, they react to a shutter. And then when there's no reaction, they start playing up and they think you're just messing about and you haven't got the moment. So that's when you get those funny little photos or the stuff that's really hard to capture. So it's about exploiting a high frame rate. It's a high film resolution. It's about grabbing those 8 megapixel files or 80 megapixel files. You can grab them in camera. On some cameras, you can on Lumix camera, I know that for sure, but you can also grab your 4K stuff in Lightroom, and I'm going to show you how to do that later on. So going back to Ebony, she's a classic example of how to use 4K or 6K photography to capture an image. So all I've done after the photo, I converted it to black and white, and you'll notice in the actual video I'm about to show you, which was this still was pulled from, that she's got a collar on. So here's the video. So Ebony runs straight into the camera. Fine, it was on the floor. I had a treat above it. So that was her third go. The first 2 times she'd wandered around the studio, had a good sniff, and then she just ran straight for the camera. So I eliminated the dust spots on the floor, converted to black and white, and just cloned out the collar. Took 5 minutes to do, if that. And it's really easy. It's an effective, nice shot. And if you're going to go and shoot your pets in the woods or something like that, this is a really, really good technique. Use a tripod, get it fixed, because you don't want to be moving around. You want to be fixed because to get that frame rate, and then you're going to exploit that running towards you, or you can have it running through the shot, but it's much better if you have the subject running towards you. Jumping over a log or something like that works really nicely as well. Remember, you can't use flash when you're using 4K photo because it's a video format, but you can use continuous lighting, which is what I did here. 2 lights in the front, 2 lights behind up higher, and that's all that was used. Now, if you like your wildlife, you'll find that really, really useful to capture that. So this is a New Zealand bellbird, and this is at my folks' home back in Akaroa when they were living there. My dad would go out and he'd put sugar water, which you can just see to the right of the pictures as a little bowl there, and he would put sugar water in there, and the bellbirds and the tuis would come around. They would go nuts for it. So I just set the camera up and I pre-focused on the water bowl, nipped inside and sort of watched from behind a curtain. Within 30 seconds, if that, they were around there going nuts. So I pre-focused because I didn't know which route the birds were going to fly. So it is a bit of luck. But what happened is this bird came right around, and I set the shutter speed so I would get a frozen shot, but I also have a little bit of motion in there as well. So it's finding that fine line where you'll get your motion and you'll get your sharpness. And that just comes from practice, but it's really fun doing it. So this was 4 shots from the same flight, and this was a 6K image. And then we've gone straight in there. So this, people are wondering, oh, what lens is that shot on? So this was shot on a GH5 with a Nocticron, which is a 42.5 1.2, and it's a micro four thirds. So you sort of want to double that to 85mm to put it in full frame terms. But it prints up nicely. I've had an artist actually do some artwork, a pencil drawing of it, and it looks absolutely amazing. Printed looks even better as well. So you can sort of get an idea of how that is. Now, I've got 2 screens here, which you'll see now. So I'm looking at my notes on the left, and you'll see on the right, I've got the birds coming into flight. You'll also, this is the new BenQ SW271C. Now, I was also fortunate enough to look at the 32-inch, and they are stunning. So when I'm editing here, you'll notice, and even if I flick through, you'll notice there's no reflection whatsoever. Have a look at the iMac here. There's lights bouncing off it left, right, and center. This is like editing on photographic paper is my best description of it, because that's exactly what it's like. And what's really cool, a little hot puck here as well. So I can quickly change my color space, RGB, black and white, the color of the button. So I've just gone straight back to Adobe RGB by pushing a button there. And for me, that just makes my life so much easier. So that's sort of like my workspace and my day. This is my day-to-day workspace, as you see as well. So I've got a hood, I've got Venetian blinds there, I've got my iMac, which is my computer, all my editing. I've even got a screen to the right here, which you'll probably see. So then I'll put stuff up in the background as well. Okay, so yes, you can see 4K photography is awesome for sports. Again, I've sort of prefixed where he's going to go rather than pan with him, because the results from my experience, if you have a static point, and this wasn't with a tripod, this was just handheld, as he jumped through the space, and I knew I'd nailed it. And this was shot for a mate called Nick Quinn. He's a very good skier. He's sponsored by Solomon. And he just needed some imagery to send his sponsors at the time. So it was really, really cool. There wasn't a lot of snow around San Flora at the time. So we sort of had to fudge it a bit, chuck some snow on top of a rock and jump off. But you make an image work, and it worked really, really well. So the image that you've seen all week and the image that I showed you at the start is of a wine glass with water, and it's quite simple with a lime dropped in. Now, the way to do this is incredibly simple. And unfortunately, the footage which I'm about to show you, I'm hoping it's going to work, but it's been a bit temperamental. I've tried it about half an hour before, and it's still playing up. So what you'll do, you'll see on the glass coming up, you'll see some lights, and this is uplit as well. So it's not full on behind. It's got lights underneath it. So it's lighting up because I want the light to come underneath it. I will put my camera on a tripod, and then I'm going around and I'm just dropping the lime straight into the water. It's really important you fill the glass right up to the rim, so it's got that little bubble at the top, because then you get the full explosion. If it's lower than that, then the splash is contained inside the glass and it's not as dramatic. And it's like a fingerprint. Every time you create one of these, it's absolutely different. You can't create the exact same one. So it's a one-off each time, and that's really cool. If you want to shoot champagne, use ginger beer, because that's the same color tones, and you can use that. You could drop strawberries into that. You can use milk. You can drop strawberries or raspberries into that, or cream, to get an idea. So you can be quite creative just and practicing on this as well. Now, people are thinking, oh, LEDs. I've got a big LED up here, and yes, that's what I use. But you can be quite cost effective, and you can look at like park cameras as well. They've got some pretty good stuff on LEDs there. So this is the footage, and I'm sort of fingers crossed this is going to work. But you can see on how full I've got the glass. So that gives you a really, really good idea on what to work for. And if you look at the reflection below, you can also see the lights reflecting, so they're uplit. And what happens when the lime hits the bottom and the splash, it sort of eliminates where the lights are. So it's quite cool. Is it going to work? It's slowly working, and then it stopped, unfortunately. But the result is still the same. You get a nice lime splash, and you'll get several shots because you're shooting in 30 frames or 60 frames a second. You've got, if you shoot 10 seconds, you've either got 600 frames to look at, or you've got 300 frames to look at. Also, a good point when you're focusing with your glass, put a card or something in the middle and focus on the midpoint, and then lock your focus down. And that'll just give you that result so much better. Then you're not focusing on a dark point behind it. Focus manually. That just makes your job easier at the end of the day. If you autofocus, you're not going to get it because it's going to go in and out. You're going to miss it. So just make sure you nail it. So what sort of happens with portraits? I'm trying to give that, no, it didn't work. With portraits, does 4K and 6K photography work in portraits? Yes, it does. Absolutely, 100%. So what do? There's no shutter. There's no flash going off when you're working with a model. So you use your noodle when you think, right, I'm going to put some really good music on, and I'm going to count to 10 and brief your model on what's going on, so it's not completely foreign to her. So this is what happens when you shoot in 4 and 6K. You count it to 10, and you can choose 10 shots, 10 shots, 10 seconds, 10 poses. Think of that. And that's quite hard to do normally. But the beauty is you'll get the shots that are in between the poses. You'll get the poses in between the poses. So you normally, the flash would go off, model would move, bang, new shot. Well, you're getting the shots in between. And there's some beautiful fluid poses that you can get within that. So say the top right one, that was one of the movements. I love that image. It's just got a beautiful fluid photo to it. Jordan's really got into it. She sort of listened, and she really took this on board. And this was sort of early days when I did it. And this was actually for the campaign for the GH5, but she really understood it. And if you communicate with your model really clearly, then you'll get the best results as well. So think of it, we've got some nice bright reds going on there, and this was all shot in 6K. So that's an 18 megapixel file, and I've got no problem with that shooting in that format. I've even shot food to get that for a commercial client when I was abroad because I couldn't get the smoke coming out in a still. It just wouldn't happen. So I put it into 6K, nailed it within 10 seconds, showed the client, they loved it, and we moved on to the next scene. So what happens if you don't want the model to move, but you're using powder and that to throw around to see what's going on? Well, this is what happens. So you brief your model. You get your makeup artist to even do the makeup because you know you want the image to be black and white. Remember, I'm using LED or continuous light here, so you may use your lights if you've got studio lights. Your modeling lights may be up to this because some studio lights have LEDs on them now. So brief my makeup artist, she went around one side, I went around the other. Briefed Kezia, the model, and bless her, this was the second time she modeled for me as well. And then we heat a load of powder at her. So this was 12 shots, 12 frames, and she didn't move once. And you can see down the bottom right, she's absolutely nailed it. And that's again, and then all I've done with that, I've just put a texture on the background because I didn't like the corrugated iron door behind. So I've got rid of that. So going back to the stills as we did, as you saw Alice earlier, and you can see what you can do using 4K or 6K, but you can just jump in between your video and your stills on your cameras as well. You can even set up your custom functions on your keys. You can do it that way, depending on how you set your camera up. When I'm shooting 4 and 6K, I tend to shoot in a mode called SS, which means start stop. So I'll hit the trigger button, it'll start recording, and then when I hit it again, it'll stop recording. Pretty simple. You can use pre-burst modes in that if you prefer, but I've found this is the best for mode for me. So we're going through a nice, beautiful, fluid fabric there. And if you're a wedding photographer, you would have seen the classic throw the dress in the air. Your assistant does that, they run away, or the groom does that, they run away, and you get the shot. So you're freezing that motion, but you're creating that motion as well. If you've got any questions, guys, as well. And John, just got your question. Could you show, John's question is, could you show me how to lock focus on a GH5? Just brought it. Sure, on a GH5, John, I've actually got a G9 here, but it's the same. If you look on the back here, you've got your focus button, which is manual, and you just dial it around to MF, which is manual focus, and also swap it to manual focus on your lens as well. So it just locks everything down once you've done it. Guys who are used to photographing on micro four thirds cameras or mirrorless cameras as well, you'll notice there's a technology in there called focus peaking because they've got video functions in them. And when you manually focus, you'll get a cast of color that will come in when your image is in focus. So a blue will come across, and I know that blue area is sharp. It looks like a little cloud sort of coming in. And you can change the color if you want to use a different color. So that's how you do it, John. It's just the dial on the back of the camera. It's the same on the GH5 as it is on the G9. And then lock your lens down as well. And pop your lens cap off like I just did. If you've got any questions, guys, please pop them into the questions channel, and the guys at BenQ will pop them through to me and I'll answer them for you. And make sure you sort of pop them in there, because if you're like me in any seminars that I watch, I always forget when I get to the end, but there will also be a Q&A at the end if you want to hold off to then. So we've done our weddings, we've done our portraits, we've talked about 4K, and we'll touch on that throughout as well. But what about sports? You know, we've got kids and stuff like that out, grandkids. We want to get out there and photograph them playing sports. Well, maybe not so much at the moment, but or motorsports, whatever sports you're into, fast moving objects, pets, kids, whatever. It all sort of applies. So this is the wonderful Lucy Gossage. I've photographed her a lot. She's an oncologist as well as a triathlete. She retired 2 years ago, and I was very fortunate to be there at her last race. So this is her absolutely piling up the hill in Pembrokeshire and Freshwater West. I'm on the back of a motorbike, so when I shoot triathlon, I'm on the back of a motorbike to get to photograph the cyclists, and that's a reason why because they are so fast, and I shoot the elites, and I want to get the elites because they're the images of sell. Quick question from Sally. Burst mode versus in 4K or 6K, which type of situations work best? I use start-stop mode in 4K and 6K because I find that works the best. I have more control. Burst mode will just do a short burst of recording for you. So that doesn't tend to work as well. I find it better if I can say record for 10 seconds or 15 seconds and then stop. There's one point also I didn't point out before, SD cards you want to get. I tend to use Lexar ones, and they are normally like a V30 or V60 because you want your card to be faster than, or a class 10, I think the old class was, which is about a V30. And you want those to be faster than the actual camera, so you don't drop any frames, because if your card is slower, the frames will drop. A question from Cameron as well. He has an Olympus 4K action camera. It can still take images as well. So what he's saying, can I capture 4K images from a video footage to capture a better composition? Yes, you can capture stills from 4K images from video footage, but you must think like a photographer. So I've had a conversation with someone who wanted to shoot 4K. They were a videographer, and he went, oh, brilliant, I'm going to be able to produce photo books now because I can shoot 4K and then grab all the stills. And I went, no, you're not, because a videographer will shoot at about a 60th or a 50th of a second, possibly lower, to get that beautiful fluid film video work. Whereas a photographer, we're shooting higher to capture the motion. So, and that's exactly what you're doing there. You're capturing the motion in 4K. You're thinking like a photographer. You're exploiting that high frame rate of 4K in there, Cameron. So I hope that helps. So when we're shooting sports, you light it best way you can. You get your mate to jump off a ramp. This is my mate Stephen Cleary, and it's a 6K photo. And this is all about angles as well. This was shot on a very wide lens at a very low angle, and he'll kill me for saying this, to make him look higher off the ground. But that's what you do. You want to make the image look as dramatic as possible. I've got leading lines in the roof, so that helps add speed to it as well. So in your subconscious, you see those leading lines in the direction he's going. And that's really, that is deliberate and thought out. There's a ramp which he's jumped off, kicks the legs up because it gives him more height if his legs are down, and it looks more dynamic as well. His right arm is deliberately up because he's on that side. So the composition is deliberate. If his right arm was up and he's on the right-hand side, it wouldn't look right. It sort of frames him in the photo, and your eyes go down the line. So think about all that when you're shooting as well. Think about your composition. When you look at your composition, look straight in the middle of the lens and then run your eye around all four corners. And if you see something that's not right, just adjust it. Zoom out, zoom in. If you're using primes, walk, move your camera around. Just do what needs to be done just to improve that composition, and you'll start noticing more, and you'll start to think a bit more. Then it'll become so much easier and more instinctive to deal with. So as you can see, they can see like Stephen on the here. If I was editing that, because this is a dark image and I had all this reflection on here, it would be an absolute nightmare. There's something I also found out about the other day, which is really quite cool. And I was talking to the guys at BenQ about, because this is a video and a photo monitor, I thought I'm going to plug my Xbox into the back of it as well, because I've got two HDMIs at the back. I've got the display port. So I've got one going to the TV, and I've one from the computer, and I've got my Xbox plugged in, and it works brilliantly. I know there's gaming monitors and that around, but it's quite cool just to switch off from time to time and just recharge at lunchtime, have a game or something, and I can do that from here. So I was quite chuffed with that. So looking at different types of sports, so horse racing, or this was actually shot for the GH5 campaign, and it was a color image. But at the time I didn't have the BenQ monitor, and I wish I had, because then I would have been able to preview it like this. Whereas now it was a black and white conversion. I shoot everything in color and raw, by the way, so then I can convert it afterwards. Some people like to shoot raw and then black and white JPEG. That's cool, but this is just the way I work. So I shot it in 4K, and this is when flukes happen. So because I was shooting on a pre-production or an engineer sample, there was 4 GH5s in the world at the time when this was shot, and I had 2 of them. This is December on a Tempe beach, a very cold morning. The sun's out. She's backlit. I wanted to use a 100 to 400 mm lens, but the firmware wouldn't allow it. So I shot it on a 35 to 100 mm, which is equivalent to 70 to 200. Shot that, and the rider came closer to me. If I'd had the other leads, I wouldn't have got the shot. I panned with her, and I got the shot in 6K. Excuse me. And because she was backlit, and because I produced a JPEG from that, I'm thinking, how good is this JPEG going to be? And I just was able to pull the detail back by just increasing the exposure. And then at the side, it's not a vignette. I brought in grads on each side and hit the bottom, and that's what it is. And this is Charlotte, and she's got this on her wall at home. It's a beautiful canvas. So what I love about technology, it always surprises you as well, because people think of JPEGs, and historically, years and years ago, the quality wasn't fantastic. And the quality now out of camera on JPEGs is superb. But as a safety net, and because I'm a professional photographer, I use RAW as my safety net, and just in case, because there has been that time when you need to do a rescue. But this was a rescue on a JPEG, and I was really, really impressed with it. When you're shooting in 6K as well, you want to sort of think about what you're photographing and how you can add to that. So being a skateboarder or a gymnast and setting that scene, you want to add a bit of grit to it. So this is shot at 3200 ISO. And normally people think, oh, I can't shoot video that high because it's going to be grainy. It is grainy, and that's the look I want. And I love grain and black and white. I miss film with that organic grainy look. And those who shot on film will know exactly what I'm on about. You can sort of create it a bit, and it's called noise, but it's not the same as being shot on film. So this is the closest I've managed to get. I love it. It's lit with 2 LED lights. So running off my car, because they're so low powered, you can do that. And I've just asked Lauren to do a backflip. And to do a backflip on concrete is not easy. So you need a good tumbling gymnast. And again, it comes in that communication on how you work together with her. And she was really cool about it, just got into it, and she absolutely nailed it. And again, this is a big print at her home of what she achieved. So it's really, really awesome. When you're shooting sports as well, you can do a still, but you can still create the motion within it. So they've just done their warm up for a swim. This was a sponsor of a race as well. So when I'm shooting, I'll make sure I get sponsors, because that's potential revenue as well. So Zone 3 wetsuits, which I'd done a video. I'd met James, who the founder of it as well. So I was shooting for them. And I wanted to just get some droplets. They'd done their warm up. So droplets don't look really good. You know they're going to do some swimming. So you sort of lead into it, and you're thinking, right, what's the next part that's going to be about a swimmer? Then you want to get the drama in the swim, and you want to create the drama and the chaos of a swim. If you've never seen a triathlon start, it is absolute chaos. And this is what it looks like. They're battling, they're kicking, they're swimming over the top of each other, but I want to get that movement. Now, as you notice in the hand at the bottom, this is why I selected this. It's not pin sharp because I've got movement in it. The water is slightly blurred because I've just got it at that cusp where it's parts of it are sharp. The guy behind, who's just bringing his arm around, so he's frozen, but the guy in the foreground, his arm is moving over the top. So I've got that movement. So again, it's just practice on getting those settings to what you want. Again, shooting sports, getting an elite rider coming over a bridge, trying to nail that number one, get the sponsors, and also freeze that motion. And that's what's happening. I'm absolutely freezing that motion. Now, if I had gone wider and I got his socks and everything, it wouldn't have been as dynamic, because I've got the road in his goggles as well. It looks really sharp, really dynamic. You can sort of imagine that pace as he's down on the tri bars as well, and that he's coming straight towards you. So what happens when you're on a motorbike and you're photographing. So back to Lucy here. She was climbing up a hill before, and Lucy can absolutely fly. So I'm on a motorbike, I'm pacing her. I'm actually shooting with this. This was at an 18mm on a G9, 8 to 18mm, and I've shot wide at 18. Nice slow shutter, but at the same pace as her. So I've got that blur behind, her upper body is still, and then you can see her legs spinning as well. So we're moving along quite fast. And then I think I actually put, at this point, you can see this might have been shot about my waist because I flipped that screen out so I can have a look. And then I've got that image here. It's about creating the illusion of speed. So you can know, it's not shot on a roadside. I'm moving beside her. I'm pacing with her. And that, again, just comes from experience, because you need an experienced rider, because when you're leaning over, he has to come to your lean. So you've got to communicate that way. It's not just, oh, I'm going to lean over and take a shot, because then the driver will be off balance. So again, it's about communication when you're working in these situations, and keeping safe as well. Using an open face helmet and things like that help you. Getting low and creating angles as well when you're shooting sports will help you and make your images stand out. So this is in Tudor Square 10B. I'm primarily thinking, well, there's a lot of black and white images here. I shoot a lot of black and white images in sport because there's so many color clashes going on. I don't want those included. I want to focus on the athletes. So the guys are whizzing past me. So I'm up against the barrier, but I've got my camera as close as I can to them. I've got the screen flipped out, and I know I'm shooting probably at about 60th of a second. So I know when they go past me, I can get that speed, but the people are further back because they're sort of almost running towards me or cycling towards me. I'll be able to freeze them. Again, it's finding that bit that works for you, and this is the sort of way I shoot. But when you're shooting these events, sort of think with commercial cap on as well. Think of those events and think of the actual sponsors. So I've used a shutter drag here. So I wanted the movement of someone cycling through it, but I wanted to show the event. And this is back in 2019, wasn't last year. And good old long course weekend down in Wales in Tenby, and where Ironman is as well. And I've just got a rider just riding straight through that shot. Love, just drag the shutter, and that's where I wanted it, just at the end. And that's sort of how you do it. Really good questions come up. Where am I focusing for the bike motion shots? So for the bike motion shots, I will actually focus. If we go back, so we get Lucy, I'm obviously focusing on upper body. On this one here, I'm focusing on the person behind, because the detail to me at the front is not as important, because there's going to be motion blur in that. So the sharpness of that is not as important, but the sharpness behind is. So focus behind the person in front. And then for this one here, my point of focus is actually the banner, because that's the important information. And because there's motion blur, I don't need that to be absolutely sharp for me. Going back to the image we saw at the start, guy doing the crucifix. And this is what it's all about, seeing the image and just seeing the light, seeing the image, and then you get a bit of luck and a guy does that for you at the finish line. It took me actually 2 years to track this guy down, believe it or not. Social media wasn't working at its finest at the time. But at the end, there's a nice big canvas that my son loves this image, and he's got that on his wall as well. So going on from sport, portraits, and some of you may know I love my street photography. And it's a great practice ground for you to get out there and try and capture that motion, freeze those objects, drag that shutter. And this is some of my street photography. This is just a snip of what I do, but I'll sort of take you through some of the technology as well. So with street photography and with technology the way it is now, you can have rolling shutters. And this is what I'm talking about with mirrorless cameras. So you have two types of shutters on a mirrorless camera. And when you're shooting traditionally, you'll have a mechanical, and on a mirrorless, you'll have an electronic and also a mechanical shutter. Now, what happens sometimes, you'll get street lights and you'll also get a rolling effect. And that's because your shutter speed is out of sync with the frequency of the lights. It's normally about 1/100th of a second you'll get it. So this is what happens with a rolling shutter. And you'll see it just cancels the pixels out and it rolls down. But if you're out of sync with the lights, you'll get that banding across your image. Whereas with a mechanical or a total shutter, it just opens and shuts the whole lot. So you don't get that effect. So that's why that happens. If we go back to our friend in Osaka, and we look at dragging the shutter, you see the whole image now. And again, I've just converted it to black and white after. Excuse me. I've converted it to black and white after and focused on him. It actually says quite clearly on there, you can see it in Japanese writing, it says, give me money now. When you go to different countries, get local knowledge. The minders who were with me at the time saying, don't approach homeless people because they can be aggressive. So, which is really hard for me because I normally approach people who are homeless, speak to them, find out their story and things like that. But what I do when I'm out and about, I drink a lot of coffee when I'm out and about, but these are the tools of the trade. So I'll carry a mobile phone, and on that mobile phone is Lightroom mobile and Photoshop mobile, and also I calibrate my mobile screen using Color True as well. So that's an app you can download, have a look at that. It's really, really cool. Loads of coffee for nutrition, loads of cake for sugar because I'm doing a load of walking. And so this was doing a bit of filming last week and the other month, and I was being filmed. I love this shot with a bus going past. And when I'm out and I'm shooting my street photography, I get ideas for future shots. So my partner's hair is going to the right. Her hair's being dragged by the wind of the bus, and that's given me straight an idea of something to do with wind and dresses and things like that, and colors. So I've got that reference photo, and I can use that now to plan a shoot. This was shot in Cardiff, and obviously wherever you are in the country, the buses are different colors. So you could do something that's going to complement that. So when you go out and shoot, don't just shoot to try and publish, shoot for reference photos as well. And that's exactly what this is. So I've dragged the shutter. Here's moving, bus is moving, one's completely still, which is fantastic. So this was shot and dragging the shutter, and also shot for a campaign I did called The Contrast of Christmas. So Gentleman Outside Harrods, classic Harrods doorman, very nice, very polite, very helpful. Yes, I asked him if he could be photographed, not a problem at all. Drag the shutter because I don't want these people involved. I don't like photographing small children when I'm doing, or any children for that matter, when I'm doing street photography. So I will drag the shutter. Only people will be sharp, and my photos are normally people that I've asked. So hence, but it creates that bustle and hustle. And again, this is handheld. I don't use a tripod when I shoot my street photography. Just go out with your phone and your camera. Don't take a bag of lenses, because if you're shooting primes, your legs become your zoom. If you're shooting a zoom, obviously you can use it, but just go out, use one lens, and I think you'll really, really surprise yourself as well. So the other aspect of the contrast of Christmas with this is Mark, and this was shot on the same day, and I approached him and asked if he could take his photo. He was a bit hesitant at first, but he had a bit of a hard time, but explained what I was doing, and he got on board, and he's a top bloke. So this was just a sort of, I photograph homeless people, and some of the people, why? Because it emphasizes the situation they're in, and within the UK, I don't believe we should be in that situation. So this was actually shot in Cardiff. This is containers for homeless people. It's an amazing setup, and it just sort of gives a perspective when normal everyday people walk through a shot, and then you've got behind what's actually going on behind them, and the amount of people that don't know what's going on there. It's quite heartbreaking and emotional. But this is just moving through the shot to sort of just show perspective, show size, show scale. And again, it shows anonymity by dragging that shutter, having that slow shutter speed. I don't have to chase those people and ask for a model release if I want to use it commercially. So that's part of the reason in that too. When you're also shooting stuff, sometimes you don't have to have any motion at all through create motion. We know it's a train station. We've got the leading lines that creates the speed. You're expecting a train to come around the corner and suddenly there'll be a blurred train or something, but you've just got that anticipation of a train coming through, and that's the motion that's in there. Sort of plays with your mind, and that's how you sort of think about it. Don't forget about, guys, if you go onto the BenQ website as well, or on the Instagram page, check out, because there is actually a competition on there as well about motion. Go and check out the details, because it's a fantastic prize there as well. And if you hang on at the end as well, there's a discount code which I'm going to put up, which you'll be able to use to buy any BenQ products as well. Question from John: which lens do I use for street photography? I use one lens, John, and since you asked, I'll actually show you my camera, which I use for street photography. It's one of two cameras which I go out with, and the camera I normally use is a GX9, Lumix GX9. Sometimes I'll go out with the G100 as well, and they're great. They're tiny cameras. They both can shoot 4K. That's not a problem. But I use a 15mm lens on here, which is equivalent to 30mm. This is a 15mm Leica, equivalent to 30mm in full frame terms. So, great question from Alex just come through about that. How do I cope? How do I manage to lower my shutter speed on bright days? Do I use filters? No, I don't. I just literally crank it right up. I close that aperture right down, so I'm shooting about f16 on the bright days. So good example was this here. Post-production, I think I just added a slight vignette to it. That was it. And I've desaturated it slightly as well. I am actually in the middle of sort of putting a package together for my presets, because I do get asked a lot about them. I thought I might actually finally do something with that. So from Cameron as well, here's a 50mm prime lens for his crop sensor camera. Would that be a good lens to take out and try dragging the shutter in street photography? Any lens, any camera is good to use for dragging the shutter. So this is another example of dragging the shutter. People walking through are blurred, because the artwork is the focus here. But Cameron, you can go out, you can use any lens. So if you're using a crop sensor, I think that's normally about 1.5, so equivalent to 75mm. So you may find it a little bit tight, but just go out and try and see how it is. It's a really nice lens by the sound of it, so you get some really nice low light situations. The reason I go out with the small camera is because I want to remain unnoticed, and that works if I go out with a big camera. So if I took out, say, like the S1R or the S5, you tend to get looked at. People notice you. If you go out with a small camera, people don't notice you. And technology these days, the cameras are so good. I also use, when I go out, I've got a Black Rapid wrist strap, and that's for security. I don't take a shoulder strap because it can't be ripped off my shoulder then. It's around my wrist. I've got full security with that now as well. So I hope that's answered your question there, Cameron. So also when we're looking at doing shutter drag, this is when perspective and shutter drag work in harmony. So some people have said to me, oh, you've zoomed on that and shot it. No, I haven't. I've actually held it here about waist height. I held it, stopped in the middle, and because in London everyone just walks past you anyway, got the back of people, which is fine, got my shutter speed bang on, got my leading lines coming in from the top and from the bottom, and also the tiles, which you don't realize are leading lines. And then the key, just a bit of luck again. This guy in the yellow shirt walks by in front of me. The girl on the right's perfect, and the girl third down is perfect as well. So it works really well, but it looks like I'm doing a zoom back, which is another technique, but I'm not. It's just dragging the shutter and getting those leading lines absolutely spot on, and it's working well. Do I use micro? Do I use stative for camera to be stable when taking the shot? Do I use a tripod? I don't use a tripod. I just use the camera's inbuilt dual AS or stabilization, which I think was what you meant. So the cameras have got stabilization in the body and in the lens, so that helps. Although the 15mm hasn't got it in the lens, so I'm using the body stabilization. I'm just trying to get through a lot of this, guys, because I want to quickly show you. So again, shutter drag, you'll see freezing the motion. And again, a cyclist coming through showing that motion. So homeless people, this is one of the situations where the battery actually took this shot and it ran out. There's a homeless people. I couldn't show them the photo afterwards. But you actually see the story in the movie. Go onto my YouTube channel, have a look at Portrait of an Artist, and you'll be able to see it. It was shot by good friend Matt Jacobs, and it's really worth a watch. So I'm going to show you how to grab. I'm going to show you how to grab your 4K stuff in Lightroom. So let's have a look. So you should be able to see my Lightroom screen now, and everything's come up. So what we've got here, we've got Ebony, and if it's red on your screen, I'm not really sure why, what's happening there. There we are. I had the wrong color space selected, and there all I did is just click a button on the hotkey and it's sorted. Okay, so when you're in Lightroom and you'll see down the bottom here, you'll see the one is selected, it shows 9 seconds. You also notice a new bar that's come up. Hopefully you can see, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor or not, but you'll see a bar with all the thumbnails. So I can grab this bar and I can drag it all the way through. Now, I know sort of key point. So this is just before Ebony runs into the shot. So 1 click, 2 click. She's not focused yet. Now she's sharp. The eyes are sharp. The eyes are still sharp. Don't want that. That's very cute still. That's cute. Still got all these shots coming through. And then we've got the shot there. And if we go jump to the end, and I actually show you the footage I wanted to show you. So this is the actual footage which you saw of Ebony. So here we go, running back through. And the beauty also about this, you can play the audio back in Lightroom as well. So you can make little sort of audio notes to yourself. So Ebony's coming through. We've got the ears going out. Now she's sharp. Sharp still. And that light pull, lovely shot, but that's the one we want. So that's the frame we want. But you'll notice she's got a collar on. And you're thinking, well, how do I grab that frame from a video file? So if you look down on the right-hand side of this panel, you'll see there's a little drop down. And on the drop down, it says capture frame. Click on that. Now, what will happen sometimes, you'll look for your photo and it'll be stacked behind here. And you just need to make sure that you've clicked on the original source folder and it'll stack out beside it. So this is the still. This is the actual footage that you grabbed it from. So now if I hit D on my keypad, it'll take me to develop. If I go to some of my presets on the left-hand side, I can go straight into my black and white. OS stands for outside, street. And for that is far too grainy, but you can see the difference between my street presets. Or I can go to a DSAT if I wanted. So basically, I'm looking for pretty much that look there. Now I would go in, I would get rid of this, I'd enhance it a bit more, bring it up brighter. I run down here, I'm going to pull in a vignette, quite a tight vignette as well. It just isolates her. Get rid of the dust spots, and that would be it, sorted. That would be my edit. That's all it would be. It's that quick and that simple. So I'll run through it again. I basically got my presets, so I went through, and all I did is just boost. I didn't even boost the contrast. I could boost the clarity a little bit just to bring out the hair. If I'm going to boost the clarity, I'm going to boost the exposure as well. But I don't want to go too crazy on the clarity, otherwise things start to a little bit weird. And then I'll just go through and look at the dust spots. Now, if you're looking for dust spots, really cool thing to get rid of them easily. Click on visualize spots and it inverts everything so you can see it like that. And it makes it really, really easy to point out all the dust spots, click it off, and easy way to work around getting rid. So we can go and click on, if you want this one here, dust spot gone. So we could click on, and we can click on these ones. It's just a different way to work. Some people prefer to do it in Photoshop. It's whatever works for you. But then that's an easy way to do it. And you can just see that they're already going there. So that's the sort of way I'll work when I'm photographing pets. If I hit E on the keypad, it'll take me back to library. And that's pretty much how I shoot all my, and pretty much how I edit my 4K stuff as well. So it's really, really simple, guys. If you've got any questions, please ask away. I'm also just going to jump back over. Excuse the clunkiness of this. I just had some issues earlier, and I just need to bring up a little offer for you guys. For some reason it wasn't showing my keynote, so hopefully it'll come up in a sec. And like anything, any technology, you hope it's always as slow as, there we go. Okay, so if you want to jot this down, guys, the offer from Park Cameras, 5% off all BenQ monitors if you use the voucher code BenQ5, and that's available from the 1st of May to the 7th of May. So from Saturday, I think, isn't it? From Saturday through to the following week. So take a photo, grab a screen grab of that, make sure you've got it. I'm sure it'll be put down the notes as well. Okay, and if you've got any Q&As, any questions, please fire away. While I'm waiting for the questions to come in, I'm also going to plug the hell out of a podcast, which I do, which is called Talking Shot. You can go on there and have a look. There's some really good stuff with the guys from Color Confidence as well, about color management. And just coming up to all my details, if you want to jot these down as well, guys, there's my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, website, and of course the podcast details. So you can have a look at it as well. So my website is rossgrieve.com, Instagram, Ross A. Grieve. Grab a photo of that. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Just waiting for your questions to come in if you've got any. I'm going to quickly go back to the offer, so make sure you guys get the offer. There we go, and there's the offer screen for you. If you've got any questions, guys, or you think of something later, just reach out on my social channels. It's not a problem. Be more than happy to talk you through everything. Always happy to show and share. I'll just hopefully bring my webcam back up. Okay, question from John. What shutter speed was the footage of Ebony shot at? Ebony was shot at one was 12/50th of a second. So 1,250th of a second was the shutter speed. The ISO off the top of my head was 400. And then obviously the aperture on that was 1.4. Tube stations, I don't tend to use, Rob's asked a question, do I ask permissions to shoot in the tube stations? Great question. If you're going to use them commercially, yes, you should get a permit. I'm not using them commercially. I don't sell images that are shot in the tube, Rob. It'd be very nice if I could do that. Darren has just asked, do I ever pull stills from 4K video capture? Yes, Darren. I don't know if you saw earlier on, I talked about 4K video and capture. Ebony was actually a 4K still pulled from 4K video. And that's how it was done in Lightroom, but I can also pull that in camera as well. Cameron, are there any other software packages that you can grab shots from 4K other than Lightroom? The camera, I can pull it from. I'm sure you can in other software packages, but I tend to use Adobe products. They work for me. They work for my workflow as well. So that's what I tend to stick with. There is also Premiere Pro. If you're using Premiere Pro, that would work as well. But Lightroom is pretty cool. So I mean, if you're shooting 6K, you could look at Premiere Pro to extract stuff, but you can also do that in Lightroom as well. Obviously, when you're loading stuff, just make sure you've got the most up-to-date updates, because when this first came out and when 6K came out, Lightroom couldn't cope with it because of different codecs to 4K. And I've just had notes switch to the front camera because I completely forgot about that as well. So sorry, guys, you had the back of my head from the last probably 5 minutes. Some great questions coming in there, absolutely fantastic as well. If you've got any more, fire them over. From Alex, do I work on full manual mode, or do I use some of the camera ones like AV, TV mode? So presuming you're shooting on Canon, Alex. So I use, weirdly enough, the Ironman photo was shot on fully automatic because I ran around the corner, saw the guy, didn't have time to sort anything out. So I literally put it in, there's a mode on here called IA, which is intelligent auto, whacked into that, got the shot. So I jump between different modes, but I would say 90% of the time I'd shoot manual, 5% of the time for time lapse will be aperture priority, and the other 5% would be completely auto. So yeah, I do jump around, and I'd use what just works. And yeah, learn your camera as well. I know it's very easy. Some people, when you get a new camera, to whack it in program or automatic, but just because it's digital cameras, it costs nothing to try out different stuff as well. So there's no more questions, guys. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Really, really enjoyed your company, and the questions have been fantastic. Thanks again, and hope to see you next time. Cheers, guys.